In this video, you're going to see two medium pose drawings done from life at School of Realist Art here in Overland Park, Kansas. I'm beginning with some vine charcoal here, and I'm using one of the Nitram charcoal holders. And if you want to know if I really think that you should get this product or not, check out my review. I'll leave the link below. So I'm starting with the vine charcoal for two reasons. One, because I can change my mind, it erases really easily. And two, because it is a quick way to fill in a large, broad area of shadow. And that's my primary goal here. When I was doing this session, it was during a time when I had been completing a bunch of thumbnail studies. And the goals of these particular thumbnail studies were to create more atmospheric drawings. You can see exactly what I'm talking about in this video below that you will find here on YouTube, where I discuss how to use thumbnails to better your shading. A lot of times I create a figure drawing and it's really just a floating figure with no shading in the background or really any context given at all. So that's what I wanted to do here, is to create deep, moody shading and include the background shading into consideration as I was doing this. So I got nice and deep dark values on the figure before I even really paid too much attention to the background. So my darkest areas are the cast shadow, where there is a cast shadow actually going up from the shoulder onto the face. There's also a really dark area at the top of the head because not only is there no light hitting there, but there's also no reflected light hitting there. The same thing is happening on the top of the shoulder on our left. So once I had those darkest darks established, I could go ahead and create a little bit more variation in the rest of the figure and then start building up the white on the light side of the figure. I want this to be a nice, rich, dramatic drawing, so having a lot of contrast between those darkest darks and the lightest lights is really essential here. I like using the charcoal this way because it allows me to almost create a painting. After I have that first layer with the vine charcoal, using the black and white charcoal, I can layer it quite a bit on this gray paper and even blend it and mix it together. In this instance, I'm not using any of the paper for my values. It is all created by either white charcoal, black charcoal, or a mixture of the two. To push that figure forward, I am using a lot of white shading in the background, and this creates a dramatic difference between the figure and that area of the background. Sometimes in retrospect, I think maybe that really light background doesn't quite fit. Like maybe it would be better if I dragged a little bit of the dark charcoal through there so that the lightest lights of the whole entire drawing were on the figure. What do you think? Do you prefer this drawing with those bright whites in the background, or do you think that I should have toned them down a little bit? Let me know in the comments below. I'm curious what you think. Now, in addition to creating the drama in the back of the figure, I also tried to tone down that arm as it's going away. So notice that I did not make that sharp and dramatic. Now here's a second drawing from the same session where my goal was the same. I wanted to create a nice dramatic feel of that light coming from below. Again, I'm starting with the vine charcoal and just blocking in large shapes. After I get the large shapes established, I will outline my shadows and fill them in with this vine charcoal. Right before drawing these two drawings in this session, I had actually used the shorter 5-minute poses in order to create a series of thumbnails exploring values. So I used my warm up to prepare for my goals in the full drawing. If I would have just done one of my other approaches to gesture drawing, I might not yet kind of be in the mode to create a dramatic drawing like this. But since I had just created these really dramatic and fully shaded thumbnails, it was really easy to just go into a longer version of that same idea, drawn larger, in order to create these moody drawings. So once again, I am filling in the shadows on the figure with that vine charcoal. And now to create something even darker, I have a stick of compressed charcoal. The reason that I wanted to switch to the compressed charcoal is because it won't erase as easily. When I smear or blend with the vine charcoal, the edges tend to disappear. The vine charcoal doesn't stick quite as well. However, with this compressed charcoal, even when I smear it and a lot smudges around, it doesn't disappear quite as much as the vine charcoal does. Once again, with the shadow established, I am looking for the darkest darks on that shadow side before I really look into the halftones and adding the white. Some of my drawings use really clear outlines, but since this is more of an atmospheric drawing, I'm using outlines less. That doesn't mean that I'm not using outlines at all, but the outlines are a little bit more like bold shading than it is a clean line. Also notice that I have let the outside boundaries disappear in some places, which is really important if you want to create a moody and atmospheric drawing. So in the end, that elbow that is going away from us, although it is currently outlined, I make it disappear into the background. And this gives you a great feeling of depth. I also let the same thing happen with the hand that is behind the hip, and this helps it to recede behind the hip. Currently in the drawing where it is right now, there is a bunch of shading on that arm, so it seems to feel level with or even in front of the hip, but shading it a little bit ends up pushing it behind the hip. So notice for when that happens. Also notice that I am not putting details in the eyes, nose, and mouth. If I were to outline those details, it would almost look like a cartoon drawing on top of a painting. So in this style of drawing, you also want to keep your outlines and your tiny details to a minimum because they won't go with the flow of the overall feeling of broad lights and shadows in this kind of drawing. Even here, where I'm adding information around the eye, notice that it is being created with gentle shading rather than with very clear outlines. The white being placed in there also is being placed by shading rather than outlining, and it's all being toned down with a coating of charcoal over the top. You can use final bits of heavy shading to emphasize certain areas, veils of shading to push back others, and final bright lights to pull out details in the lightest areas. Just make sure to place them in a way that makes sense according to where you really want the viewer to be paying attention and according to what places are closer to the viewer than others. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. If you would like full figure drawing tutorials and reference photos, check out patreon.com/School of Realist Art. And for an in-depth figure drawing course, check out figuredrawingacademy.com. Thanks so much, and I'll see you here next time.